Hello YouTube, today I'm going to be replacing my passenger motor mount on my 2013 Mazda 3. On Mazda 3s made from 2004 all the way up until 2013, the passenger motor mount or the top motor mount is a very common failure point. And recently mine just went out, so today I'm going to show you how to replace it. For the second generation Mazda 3s with the Skyactiv motors and the manual transmissions, the motor mount they use is the one that has this arm that sticks out and it has 3 bolt holes, while all the other models come with 2 bolt holes right here. And that includes any of the first generation I or S models, any of the Mazda Speed models, any of the models with the 2-liter MZR, the 2-liter, 2.5 liter, MZRs, or the 2.3s. But if you have a 2-liter Skyactiv with a manual transmission, it specifically needs this style of motor mount. And that's something that a lot of people will not point out or share to you. And when you go to look up the part on a lot of the online auto parts stores, if you go down to your local auto parts store, their AutoZone or O'Reilly's or whatever and such, they're going to show you the motor mount with the 2 holes that are right here. So there's a small little arm that sticks out right here with 2 holes. That's one they'll show you, and they'll tell you that it's for a 2012 or 2013 Mazda 3 with the Skyactiv and manual transmission. That is not true. The one that you're supposed to look for these cars, Skyactiv manual transmission 2012 to 2013, are going to have the ones with the big arm right here with 3 holes, just like this. So make sure that you don't make that mistake. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is remove the under tray on these cars. This way you can get to the engine. The reason for this is because in order to install the motor mount, you need to be able to lift the engine up with a jack, and the plastic under tray is going to be in your way. So that's going to be your first step, is going to remove the plastic under tray. Just make sure your car's supported by something. I am using ramps in this case. So let's go ahead and get started. To remove the under tray, you're going to need to remove 5 screws and 9 bolts. So the screws, as you can see, are also a hex bolt as well. You can either use an 8mm socket, which is what I'm going to use, or you can use a Phillips head. I want to say the size is either a 6 or an 8, but I could be wrong on that. And then for all the bolts, they're going to be 10mm. To reach the bolts in here, you're either going to need a deep socket or an extension. I know I said 9 bolts. That will be the case for me, at least it looks like, because it looks like I may have 2 missing bolts in the back of the under tray. I'm not sure where they went. On the second owner of this car, I'm not sure what happened to them. So I don't know if you can see on camera, but I have a zip tie which is actually holding up the back side of the under tray. So it might be a total of 11 bolts for you. So I just got off all the bolts for the main under tray piece, and it turns out you really don't need to remove the front piece if you don't want to. You can if you want. It'll make it maybe a little easier, but for the most part, once you take off these bolts right here, you're free from this front under tray piece. You don't need to remove this. So for that, I'm just going to drop this piece, but you can drop this piece too if you want. After you remove all the bolts for the under tray, on the side mounts for the under tray, you're going to see that there are tabs on both sides. There's 1 tab on each side. In order to remove the under tray from the tab, what you would do is push up and then you pull out. It's best done with 2 hands, so I'll do it off camera, but hopefully you can get the idea. Once you have the under tray off, it is now time to get the car off of whatever support you have, whether it's on jack stands or ramps. This way you can get a jack underneath the engine so that you can lift it up. So the reason you would want to have your engine lifted is because what you're actually doing is you're supporting the weight of the engine with the jack. And you're going to want to do that because when you go to remove the engine mount, the engine is basically going to be free to go. You're letting the engine free, and it's going to drop down if you don't have it supported. So you're going to want the engine to be supported by lifting it with the jack. Because we're working with the top motor mount, which is on the passenger side, we're going to be lifting up the engine. We're going to be doing this by the oil pan, which is going to be right here, this black bulge right here. This is the transmission. You don't want to lift the transmission. You want to lift up the engine. Make sure that you have a block of wood to support the engine, because if you go and lift the engine up with just the metal part of the jack, you're going to punch right through your oil pan, and you don't want to do that. So this is exactly how you're going to want to do it. I have my jack right here, and there's a wood block in between where the jack point is and where my engine's oil pan is. And what you want to do is you want to lift it up in order to keep the engine supported. Now that our engine is supported, we can go under the hood and we can start removing our motor mount. To get to the engine mount, first you're going to want to remove your engine cover, and then you got to remove your coolant tank. To remove your coolant tank, there are going to be two tabs. There's going to be one in the back, and there's going to be one in the front, just right next to the washer fluid. It's going to be right here. To remove your engine mount, you would take both sides with both your hands, grab it, and then you would slide forward, and then you should feel like a pop, and then you can slide it up. And this way it'll come off. When you remove your coolant tank, you're going to want to remove the back tab first before you remove the front one. Once you get your coolant reservoir off, you're now able to access the passenger side motor mount. And I don't know if you can see on camera, but there is all this liquid staining underneath the area where the engine mount is. I don't know if you can't see from that side. Yeah, but if you look down there, you can see all the staining from the liquid that comes out of the motor mount. This is a hydraulic motor mount, so it uses a oil to dampen the vibrations of the engine. And so when you see all of this liquid staining underneath the motor mount, that is a telltale sign that it has failed. The lifetime for these mounts is typically between 30,000 and 90,000 miles. And like I said earlier, they are a very common failure point on these cars. It's almost as if they're a wear item, to be honest with you. But I have well over 100,000 miles on this car, and this looks to be actually the original motor mount. So it's pretty surprising that it would have lasted this long. To remove the motor mount, all of the nuts and bolts are 17 millimeter. So like I said earlier, this is a Skyactiv with the manual transmission. So it's going to be a total of 5 nuts and bolts you're going to remove. There's 3 nuts here that connect the engine mount to the engine, and then there's 2 bolts. There's one down here, and then there's one over here somewhere. There it is, right there where my finger's pointing at. Those are the 2 bolts that connect the motor mount to the frame. The nuts and bolts holding the motor mount together to the engine and the frame are pretty tight, so you're going to need a breaker bar to be able to remove them, as well as an extension so that you can remove the 2 bolts that are connecting to the frame. Once you get off all your nuts and bolts, you can now remove your engine mount. So here I've got the old motor mount on the right and the new motor mount on the left. So if I take the old motor mount and flip it upside down, you can see where it failed right here. There's a crack in where the fluid would be in this rubber sort of reservoir, I guess. And if I bend it on the arm, you can see that crack move, and the motor mount moves quite easily just with only my fingers. That is not what you want. And then also you can see all of the staining from the oil that spilled out all over the engine mount. And then if we go to the car, and if we look in there, like I showed you earlier, we can get a much clearer view of all of the fluid that has spilled out. Even some of it looks like it spilled onto the engine a little bit. Now it is time to put the new motor mount in. And as you can see now, I went ahead and I cleaned up all inside here. So this way the mount has a nice clean surface to stay on. Before installing your new engine mount, you're going to want to make sure that it fits in, and in this case it does. As you can see, for the Skyactiv models, manual transmission, 1, 2, 3, there's going to be 3 bolts holding the engine. For other models, it's going to be only 2. Now it is time to bolt down the engine mount to the frame, but before we go ahead and do that, we're going to apply some high strength red thread locker to the bolts before we go ahead and tighten them down. As you can see, there is some on there from the factory, so I would think it'd be a good idea to apply some before we go ahead and bolt this down. For the bolts that attach the engine to the engine mount, no thread locker seems to be necessary. I don't see any on there, so I'm not going to apply any there. But if you're going to apply some to here, I would probably just recommend just blue thread locker or the medium strength stuff. I don't know about applying the high strength stuff to these bolts, but it looks like definitely the bolts that go to the frame, it definitely looks like they need red thread locker. So I'll go ahead and apply that, and then I'll bolt the engine mount down to the frame. All right, chassis bolts mounted. All right, now our engine is connected to our engine mount. This is the time to make sure that your engine is properly mounted to the frame with the engine mount, and make sure everything is tightened properly. So what I've done is I have moved the coolant reservoir over, but I have not attached it. I've left it loose, so this way, if I need to tighten anything, I can come back and tighten the stuff without having to remove this again. So first thing I got to do is lower the engine from the jack. When you remove the engine from the jack, you want to drop it very slowly to make sure that everything is attached properly. Otherwise, if you just drop the engine, it could just fall out. So you want to avoid doing that. But I managed to get the jack off from the car, and it seems to be attached. So now the next test is to start the engine. One thing you're also going to want to check for is leaks from your coolant reservoir. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the car out and test it at very low speeds, just around the neighborhood, and make sure that there's no clunks. All right, I just finished my test drive and everything seems to check out. So now let's go ahead and reassemble the underside. All right, just finished putting on the under tray. as well as putting back the coolant reservoir. And just like that, new motor mount installed. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you're interested in more Mazda 3 content, please consider subscribing. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video.